Level 0. It always begins quietly. Not with explosions, not with spaceships blotting out the sky, but with something so small most people wouldn't even notice. Imagine scrolling through late-night radio static and suddenly there's a pattern. Not random white noise, but pulses. Organized, precise. Almost like someone or something is knocking. That's level 0, the very first whisper that we might not be alone. At this stage, the invasion isn't obvious. It's hidden in strange signals from deep space, mysterious lights recorded by airline pilots, or those odd blips the military later explains away as weather balloons. Sure, because weather balloons zigzag at impossible speeds, right? Humans actually experienced something close to this in 1977. Astronomer Jerry Amon detected what's now called the wow signal, a radio burst so unusual that he literally wrote wow next to it in the data. To this day, no one knows where it came from. Harmless? Probably. But what if that's exactly how it starts? Aliens just checking if anyone's home? Level 0 isn't terrifying because of destruction. It's terrifying because of implication. A knock at the cosmic door doesn't come with a return address. And if someone out there is advanced enough to send a signal across light years, you better believe they're advanced enough to find us. But that's just the beginning. Because once the doorbell's rung, what comes next might make us wish we never answered. Level 1. So the signal's been heard, the doorbell has been rung. But instead of barging in, level 1 is when the visitors send a scout to peek through the window. And honestly, that's almost creepier. At this stage, you wouldn't see giant motherships hanging over New York. You'd see small, strange anomalies, glowing objects darting across the night sky, metallic shapes hovering silently above highways, or mysterious drones-like craft spotted by fighter pilots. Sound familiar? That's because it is. In fact, between 2004 and 2015, the U.S. Navy recorded several encounters with unidentified tic-tac-shaped objects that moved in ways no human technology should, accelerating instantly, changing direction mid-flight, and vanishing without a trace. If those were scouts, they weren't exactly subtle. Level 1 is like the cosmic version of window shopping. Aliens wouldn't waste their main force yet. Instead, they'd send automated probes, drones, or smaller craft to observe us. Our defenses, our behavior, maybe even what snacks we keep in the fridge. And if you think that sounds far-fetched, remember, we already do this. NASA has sent probes like Voyager and New Horizons to study distant planets. We're literally somebody else's alien scout right now. The unsettling part isn't just being watched, it's not knowing the motive. Are they scientists cataloging species? Tourists on a cosmic road trip? Or predators mapping out their next meal? And here's the kicker. At level 1, most people wouldn't even believe it's happening. Governments downplay it, skeptics dismiss it, and the rest of us scroll past the headlines, but the scouts are already here. And they're taking notes. Because the next step after watching is testing. And that's where things start to get messy. Level 2. If level 1 was the window peak, level 2 is when they jiggle the doorknob. Not a full break-in, but enough to see how sturdy the lock really is. At this stage, the encounters shift from distant and mysterious to personal. Small towns report strange blackouts. Entire herds of cattle turn up mutilated in ways that defy explanation. Planes vanish from radar, never to be found again. Creepy? Absolutely. But it's also a test run. Aliens at this level wouldn't be here to conquer, at least not yet. They'd be running experiments, poking, prodding, and seeing how we react. And history has given us plenty of eyebrow-raising examples. Think about the 1967 Malmstrom Air Force Base incident, where UFOs allegedly disabled nuclear missiles. Not destroyed, disabled. As if to say, yeah, we see your weapons and we're not impressed. Or the infamous 1966 Westall encounter in Australia, where over 200 students and teachers claimed to see a saucer land, hover, and then take off, leaving scorched earth behind. That wasn't subtle, it was a demonstration. From a scientific perspective, it makes sense. Before any species launches a full-scale invasion, they'd need to understand their opponent's capabilities. What weapons do we have? How do we organize defense? Do we panic easily? In other words, they'd want to push the buttons, literally and figuratively. Now, the unsettling part is how we'd perceive these tests. To governments, they might look like malfunctions or natural disasters. To ordinary people, they'd feel like spooky campfire stories, but to the aliens, it's just data collection. And here's the twist. Once the tests are complete, they don't need to guess how we'll react. They already know, which means the warm-up is over and the real game is about to begin. Level 3, at Level 2, only a handful of people notice the oddities. Strange lights, sudden blackouts, malfunctions, no one can quite explain. But Level 3 is when it becomes impossible to ignore. The truth isn't whispered anymore, it's broadcast. Imagine this. Breaking news interrupts your regular programming. A glowing craft hovers over Los Angeles for hours, live streamed by thousands of phones. Social media erupts. Governments scramble to respond, but every denial looks weaker than the last because the footage is everywhere. Welcome to Level 3 when alien presence goes public. We've had close calls before. In 1952, Washington, D.C. went into a panic when radar operators and fighter pilots tracked multiple unidentified objects darting over the Capitol. Newspapers called it the Washington Flap, and it forced the Air Force to hold a press conference. Their excuse? Temperature inversion. Yeah, because hot air explains flying saucers outrunning jets. Sure, this stage is terrifying because it destroys the illusion of normal life. Markets crash. Religious leaders argue over what it means for humanity. Some people celebrate. Finally, proof we're not alone. Others panic, convinced it's the beginning of the end. The world becomes divided. Believers versus skeptics. Hope versus fear. And the aliens? They don't even have to fire a shot. By simply showing themselves in undeniable ways, they've already destabilized governments, economies, and trust between nations. Suddenly, conspiracy theorists don't sound so crazy, and every light in the sky becomes a reason to look over your shoulder. But this is only the announcement. Because after making their presence undeniable, the next logical step isn't just being seen, it's taking action. And that's where things escalate into a nightmare. Level 4. At this point, denial is no longer possible. Humanity has seen them, governments have admitted it, and panic is global. But Level 4 is when the waiting ends, and the aliens finally make their move. It doesn't start with lasers blasting the White House or motherships blotting out the sun. No, a smart invasion begins with precision strikes. Power grids collapse, satellites blink offline. The internet goes dark in entire regions. Imagine waking up to find no electricity, no phone service, no way to call for help. Just silence. It's not chaos yet, but it's the perfect setup for what comes next. Military bases would be the first to fall. Why waste time fighting jets and tanks when you can disable them before they even launch? Think about how modern warfare already works. The US has cyber weapons capable of shutting down nuclear plants from halfway around the world. Now picture a civilization thousands of years ahead of us doing the same thing, but on a planetary scale. And then come the visible attacks. Major cities targeted with surgical precision, bridges collapsing, skyscrapers turned to rubble, oceans boiling with strange craft. The strategy isn't mass destruction, it's control through fear. Show the world's largest powers that resistance is useless, and the rest will fold on their own. History gives us a glimpse of how people might react. After the 9/11's attacks, global travel, economies, and governments were shaken overnight. Now multiply that shock by 1,000. Level 4 isn't just war, it's psychological domination. And the scariest part? This is still just the opening act, because once they've crippled our defenses, the real nightmare begins. Occupation. Level 5. Explosions and collapsing cities grab headlines, but Level 5 is far more chilling. Once the defenses are down, an intelligent invader doesn't waste resources on endless destruction. They move in, they occupy. At this stage, the alien strategy shifts from shock and awe to control. Skies no longer burn with constant attacks, but instead with strange hovering structures. Massive stations anchoring themselves over key cities. Imagine waking up to see one suspended silently above your skyline, casting a shadow for miles. That shadow becomes a reminder. They own this space now. Occupation wouldn't necessarily look like stormtroopers marching in the streets. A smarter method is infiltration. Maybe they implant their own systems into our infrastructure, our food supply, our water treatment, even our medicine. Or worse, maybe they infiltrate people themselves. Stories of shapeshifters and body snatchers have haunted human imagination for centuries. But what if those tales were less fiction and more preparation? History tells us how devastating occupation can be. During World War II, entire nations were swallowed not through battles, but through gradual control of resources, propaganda, and fear. Resistance existed, yes, but always in the shadows, always under the threat of brutal retaliation. The terrifying part of Level 5 is that life almost looks normal on the surface. People still go to work, still buy groceries, still tuck their kids in at night. But hovering above it all is the unshakable truth. Humanity is no longer in charge. Every decision, every move, every breath is under surveillance. And if you think people would fight back, you're right. But that resistance, brave as it may be, sets the stage for an even darker chapter. Level 6, occupation never lasts quietly. At some point, human nature kicks in and people begin to push back. Level 6 is when scattered survivors and hidden networks rise to form organized resistance. Think about how it happens in history. During World War II, resistance movements formed in occupied France, Poland, and beyond. They didn't have superior weapons or numbers, but they had something invaders rarely understand: determination. Humans fight hardest when everything is stripped away. And against alien occupiers, that defiance would become humanity's only weapon. In Level 6, the war shifts from open battles to guerrilla tactics. Imagine sabotage missions on alien supply lines, hacking into their communication networks, or even stealing their technology. Entire cities might go dark overnight, not because the aliens shut them down, but because humans did, sending a message: we're still here. Of course, this stage wouldn't look heroic from every angle. Resistance comes with sacrifice. Civilians caught in crossfire, betrayals from those who'd rather collaborate than suffer. Food shortages, disease, and constant fear would shape daily life. The moral dilemmas would be brutal. Who do you save and who do you sacrifice for the greater good? And yet, resistance movements have always had one undeniable effect: hope. The sight of a single alien craft brought down by human hands could spark revolutions across the globe. Underground leaders, whispered networks, secret signals, all fueling a fire the occupiers can't fully extinguish. But the aliens wouldn't just stand by and watch. For every act of defiance, they'd escalate their own tactics. And what they unleash next isn't just about domination, it's about breaking the human spirit entirely. Level 7. Resistance sparks hope, but hope is exactly what the occupiers want to crush. At Level 7, the aliens stop playing patient overlords and start showing what they're truly capable of. Instead of targeting weapons or governments, they go after humanity itself. Imagine biological warfare, but on a level we can barely comprehend. Viruses designed to bypass our immune systems, clouds of engineered spores drifting silently through the air, or parasites that alter behavior, turning friends into traitors without anyone realizing it. Some scientists even speculate that if aliens were advanced enough, they could manipulate our very DNA, rewriting humanity to suit their purposes. History tells us how devastating this strategy can be. During the Black Death in the 14th century, entire civilizations buckled under the weight of disease alone, no armies required. Now imagine a force deliberately unleashing something far deadlier with full control over its spread. That's not just war, it's extermination dressed up as efficiency. But it wouldn't stop there. Level 7 is also psychological warfare. Aliens could disrupt communication networks, hijack broadcasts, and flood entire populations with false information. One message might say resistance forces were wiped out. Another might promise safety if you cooperate. And in a world already fractured by fear, those lies could be just as destructive as any weapon. The cruel genius of Level 7 is that it doesn't just kill, it divides. Neighbors don't trust each other. Soldiers doubt their commanders. Families wonder if their loved ones are even still themselves. And while humanity scrambles in confusion, the aliens tighten their grip. Because once the spirit of resistance breaks, the next level isn't about fighting back. It's about survival at any cost. Level 8. By Level 8, the war has stopped feeling like a fight for victory. It's a fight just to exist. Humanity is cornered, battered, and running out of options. And that's when desperation sets in. At this stage, survival demands choices so brutal they almost don't feel human. Entire cities might be evacuated not to save the people, but to turn them into bait, luring alien forces into traps. Resistance leaders could order strikes on infrastructure that once sustained life, power plants, food reserves, even hospitals, just to deny the occupiers resources. The cost? Innocent lives lost by human hands. History shows how desperation changes people. In the siege of Leningrad during World War II, civilians endured starvation, freezing winters, and constant bombardment. Millions perished, but those who survived did so through sheer willpower and unimaginable sacrifices. Now amplify that to a planetary scale. Imagine families forced underground for years, nations collapsing into fragments, and humanity reduced to pockets of survivors clinging to whatever scraps they can. Technology, too, becomes a double-edged sword. Maybe desperate scientists attempt to reverse engineer alien weapons, even if the experiments kill thousands. Maybe leaders consider using nuclear strikes against occupied cities, knowing full well they'd be wiping out their own people in the process. These aren't strategies for victory, they're gambles. Hail Marys made in the hope of buying just a little more time. Level 8 is terrifying because it forces us to question what humanity would become when survival outweighs morality. Would we remain united or tear each other apart in the name of survival? And yet, as history has always shown, it's in these darkest hours that the seeds of a turning point are planted. Level 9. Every invasion story eventually reaches the point where desperation collides with defiance. That's Level 9. The all-or-nothing moment when humanity throws everything it has left into one last stand. By now, Earth is scarred. Cities lie in ruins, resources are nearly gone, and billions may already be lost. But in the ashes, something unbreakable takes root: the refusal to surrender. History is full of examples where hopeless battles still shaped the outcome. The Battle of Thermopylae, where a few hundred Spartans faced thousands, wasn't about victory, it was about defiance that inspired generations. Humanity, at level 9, takes the same gamble. This showdown wouldn't be fought with brute strength alone. It would hinge on ingenuity. Maybe resistance fighters discover a hidden weakness in alien technology, something overlooked because the invaders underestimated us. Perhaps a virus, not biological, but digital, slips into their systems and cripples their fleets. Or maybe it's sheer recklessness, launching every nuclear weapon at once, knowing it could destroy Earth as surely as it could destroy them. The atmosphere of level 9 is pure tension. Skies ablaze with fire, oceans boiling with wreckage, cities turn to battlegrounds where survival lasts only minutes at a time. Humanity isn't united by borders anymore, just by the shared belief that this is the last chance. And what makes this stage so haunting is the uncertainty. Even if we land a decisive blow, even if the aliens retreat, the cost is staggering. Victory feels less like triumph and more like survival bought at an unimaginable price. But one question lingers. When the dust settles, will humanity stand tall as victors, or as survivors clinging to a shattered world? Level 10. The war is over, but Level 10 proves that survival doesn't always mean victory. Because even if humanity drives the invaders back, nothing will ever be the same again. Picture the Earth at this stage. Entire continents scarred by battle. Oceans filled with wreckage that will remain for centuries. Skies still carrying the silent shadows of alien machinery left behind. Humanity may have won, but the cost is staggering. Billions gone, cities erased, cultures wiped out. It's not a return to normal, it's a reset. And then comes the most unsettling realization. If one alien civilization found us, what's stopping another? Maybe they weren't even the strongest. Maybe they were just the first. In that sense, Level 10 isn't closure. It's the opening chapter of a much bigger story. History reminds us that aftermaths often shape the future more than the battles themselves. After World War II, the map of the world was redrawn, empires collapsed, and a new global order emerged. Imagine that, but on a planetary scale. Governments would scramble to rebuild, survivors would cling to scraps of hope, and humanity would face a choice: rebuild fractured or unite under the shared trauma of nearly losing it all. And here's the haunting part. What if the invaders never truly left? A few hidden among us, disguised or dormant, waiting. Or worse, what if the war wasn't meant to conquer at all, but to test? To see if humanity is worth dealing with? Or worth erasing later? Level 10 isn't about explosions and battles, it's about what comes after. The silence, the rebuilding, and the realization that the universe has noticed us. And once that happens, we can never go back to being alone.